And then he tells me, she brought back my wallet and not a penny was missing. That's how I knew I could trust her. And I had $5,000 in cash in my wallet. Hey everyone, welcome into another episode of the Story Lesson Advice Podcast, part of Saturday is Datterday Media. SIDmedia.net is the website. At Saturday is Datterday Media is the YouTube and Instagram handle. Multiple podcasts, multiple video series, blogs, books, all in due time. Thank you for listening. We'll get right into it. So I gave you a teaser of the story. I'll start at the beginning of the story with it. So a while ago, I went golfing with someone that I didn't know very well, and it was a newer person that I had met, and hey, we went golfing, awesome. So nice guy, and we went golfing, and halfway through golfing, he was telling me this story of that he was a member at this club that we were at, and one day he had left his wallet by accident in the golf club, or in the golf cart. And he came back later that day when he realized it, and the beverage cart woman had grabbed the wallet and taken it back to the clubhouse or whatever, kept it on her, and he came back, and one way or another they bumped into each other, and she's like, oh yeah, I've got your wallet, here you go. And he was telling me, hey, I know she's good people because she didn't take any money out, and I had $5,000 in cash on me in the wallet. And to me, I didn't ask this question, but what went through my head was, what in the shit are you doing with $5,000 in cash in your wallet? First of all, what kind of a Costanza wallet do you have to have? I mean, it's going to be like you're sitting on a brick if you're having $5,000 in cash in your wallet. But why would you have that? Like, if you have enough money to have, if you make enough money to have $5,000 in cash in your wallet, then you obviously don't show up. You're not going to any kind of places that require you to have cash. So you might want to have some money if you're going to valet your car or whatever like that. But why on earth would you have $5,000 in cash on you at any time unless you are making a drug deal? I don't understand. And I was telling one of my buddies this, and I was just flabbergasted. And I asked him that, why the hell would you have that? And he said, just so, without skipping a beat. He's like, well, because he doesn't want his wife to know what he's doing. And like, that just stopped me dead in my tracks. And like, I was like, yep, that makes total sense. And part of me is like, I don't know what the hell you're doing with $5,000. I mean, sure, obvious answer is you're going to the strip club or you're going gambling or whatever, but $5,000, that's a lot of clams to be keeping in your wallet. But I also think from golfing with this person and spending the day with this person that it was very clear that there was a certain presentation that was trying to be given off, a certain vibe that was trying to be created, a certain aura that was trying to be created about that. And before I judged, and I don't want you to think I'm judging, even though I am, like, get out of here. You don't need $5,000 in your wallet. But it reminded me of when I was in my mid-20s, why I spent money on cars that I couldn't afford and bought clothes that I didn't need and spent money on watches that I didn't need. I've got 2 wrists. I only wear a watch on one of them. Why do I need 5 watches, right? But I think it all goes back to this concept of this fantasy that we have, this I don't know what to call it, but this infatuation, there's the better word, with the idea of impressing strangers, wanting to impress strangers. All right, and now it's time for this week's sponsor, I Wish I Had. And this week's sponsor, I Wish I Had, is Bentgo Stay Fresh meal container products. Now, I recently discovered them because I was doing some major meal prep and stuff that I can throw in the freezer and just get way ahead on things, which I highly recommend doing, by the way. And I stumbled across this particular brand, Bentgo, and I was looking at just some storage containers. So they've got all sorts of things like meal prep containers, which I use. They can also be meal prep containers that have dividers in them. So you could have a protein and a green veg and a starch. There's other food storage containers that are different materials. They have special containers for salads and soups. They've got lunch boxes. They've got kids stuff. They've got glass and stainless. They even have bags that are designed to do stuff. A lot of really cool kids collection things, even water bottles, all sorts of stuff. So if you're looking to get rid of just the shitty Tupperware that you typically buy at the grocery store and want some better storage containers for your food, for your kids' food, packing kids' stuff for lunch, you taking things to work, you storing stuff in the freezer, I highly recommend Bentgo Stay Fresh. So this is this week's sponsor, I Wish I Had. Okay, so I gave you the story of this guy I went golfing with that was carrying around $5,000 in cash on him, left it in his golf cart. Luckily, someone found it, didn't take any money, gave it back to him. I was just flabbergasted and perplexed why anybody would have $5,000 in cash on him. And my buddy said, well, it's because he doesn't want his wife to know what he's doing. That makes total sense. And also, it brought me back to when I used to spend money foolishly on cars and clothes and watches and all sorts of stuff. And it was really this idea and this infatuation with trying to impress strangers. And I don't know where that comes from just overall, but if you look around, everybody is trying to impress strangers. And I'm as guilty as the next person, although now I think I'm less concerned about that. I just don't care anymore. But man, for the longest time, I was so focused on that. And it goes back to other things that I've talked about in previous episodes about the cost of intersection and value, of you buying a $40,000 SUV versus a $90,000 SUV. Are you getting $50,000 more value out of that more expensive SUV? Probably not. What you're getting is a perceived value, and you're getting the stranger appeal that strangers are going to see you pull up in a Range Rover instead of a Honda, or a Lexus instead of a Honda, and they're going to say, ooh, wow, that person's cool. Except nobody's doing that. No one cares, right? If you pull up an Aston Martin, okay, different story, maybe, for me. But my wife, she doesn't care. Every time we walk by one of those cars when we're in Scottsdale, we see a Ferrari or Lamborghini, an Aston Martin. I'm like, wow, that's an awesome car. My wife's like, yeah, whatever. No, it's ugly. I'm like, all right, sweet, thanks. But the idea of us wanting to impress strangers, we go on vacation, right? We buy new clothes and new swimsuits and new things so we can wear on vacation. And is that to impress the person that we're going on vacation with? Is that to feel good about ourselves? Or is it because we want to create this vibe and this aura about ourselves on vacation as this person that saunters down to the swimming pool or, saunters to the table at dinner or whatever? So I just think that's such an interesting thing. But the lesson that I took away from that and that I eventually learned of myself is stop trying to impress strangers. Spend time with yourself in your own head and try to understand, why are you doing that? What is the reason that I, and maybe you or others, are so focused on the outward and instead of focusing on the inward? And I've had to ask myself those questions. And for me, I traced it back to just ultimately wanting to feel a sense of belonging and wanting to feel that I was liked by the people, that I was accepted. So I'm chasing things that I think are going to put me in a position or elevate me in other people's eyes. And really all it did was just waste time and money and took away from me building my actual life and building things that actually mattered and focusing on me growing as a person emotionally and spiritually and mentally and physically and all of those ways. And I was so focused on all of those things that I ended up just totally missing out on a lot of growth. And I think a lot of us, especially guys, can be in this position where all of a sudden you pick your head up one day and you're in your 40s, like I am, and you're like, I'm not probably as mature as I should be. I'm not as mature emotionally, spiritually, mentally. Maybe I've let myself go physically. And it kind of goes back to other things I've been talking about in the past on the podcast about where you're focusing, what you're focusing on, and being focused on the wrong things and finding value in the wrong things. And for me, I've spent a lot of time in the past trying to impress strangers, and all it did was negatively impact me actually being able to impress strangers because I've become a better person. So I've been so focused as posing and trying to focus and pretend that I was a better person or a cool person or had money or whatever, that I was spending all my time doing that instead of actually just putting in the effort to be those things legitimately, because those things would actually add real value. Being a better person, being a smarter person, being more emotionally developed, all of those things. And instead, I'm trying to pretend that I've got all that stuff, pretend that I've got my act together. So I think that's a valuable lesson for us to learn, is stop trying to impress strangers. If you have $5,000 in your wallet right now or in your purse, take that shit to the bank. You don't need it. Keep $40 in your wallet or your purse in case you need to use cash for anything. And that's it. Don't waste your time with $5,000 in your pocket. Get out of here. Crazy. Okay, this is one of the silliest, most obvious, roll your eyes, just the tip segments. But it is something that has been, and I say this passionately, a game changer in my life. And it is the simple concept of having a garbage can in your car. And that might seem as obvious as day, but having a garbage can in your car is something that can dramatically improve the quality of your life. And for years, almost a decade, I worked in outside sales. So, my office was my car. I was in my car all day long driving around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I would pack a lunch. So I'd pack my food, pack my snacks. I'd bring water. Sometimes I'd stop and get a coffee or get a Gatorade or something at, a gas station. And man, the front passenger floor used to be my garbage can. And at the end of every day or every week, it was hilarious. Make a turn and you can just hear this cascade of empty vessels of water bottles and wrappers just rolling around the car. So I finally got a garbage can. It sits behind me in the passenger back seat on the ground, and it's something I can reach without even having to take my eyes off the road. And I can drop in something, especially with kids. It's a huge thing. My wife fought me on this for a long time. She didn't want a garbage can in her car. And then every time I would get in, it was like, just entering a garbage disposal. So finally got that. So obviously the most simple, basic, just the tip segment. But if you do not have a garbage can in your car, go get one on Amazon. I'll have a link where you can get this one and the one that I use in the show notes. And go take a look at it, and you will be so pleasantly surprised. Don't just get a Target bag. Get an actual little garbage can for your car. That is this week's Just the Tip. Okay, so I gave you the story of the guy with $5,000 in his wallet. And why the hell would you have that much money unless you don't want other people to know what you're doing with that much money? So don't have $5,000. That's a story and a lesson and a piece of advice. Don't have that kind of money on you ever. That's just a dumb idea. The lesson about that is stop trying to impress strangers. Don't worry about what other people think that much, where you are doing outward things like I used to do, where you're spending money, you're buying things, you're making life decisions based on complete strangers' potential perceived glancing opinion of you that is fleeting at best. And it is amazing and staggering how much weight we all, myself included, put into the outward projection of what we want people to think of us that we don't even know and they don't even know us. And I don't know where that is deeply rooted for everybody, but you can totally see those people, whether they're in the gym or you see them at a store or out at a restaurant or at a bar or wherever, and they are just putting out vibe central. Vibe city is where they're going. And for what? I have no idea. I roll my eyes and walk past you, and I never think about you again. And that's what most people do. But for whatever reason, we are just infatuated with that idea. The advice that I would go back and give myself when I was spending money I didn't have on cars and clothes and watches I couldn't afford, and the advice I'll share with my daughter, and the advice maybe can be helpful for anybody listening, is a question actually. And the question is, where do you place your value? And at the end of the day, what things do we actually place value on? I mean, I've talked about this before, but if everything was stripped away, what would actually be important to you or to me? Is it likes on social media? Is it a woman or a man smiling at you from across the bar? Is it people at work telling you what a great job you did on some project? Are those the things that matter? Is it somebody thinking that you have a cool car? I don't know. But the advice that I would give is to ask yourself where and what you actually place value on. And I remember having a car that still to this day is the coolest car that I ever owned. It was a Volkswagen CC, and it was kind of a curved, sexy car. And it was the first year that it came out, and there were no markings on it other than the Volkswagen badge. And I got it in black, and it had two-toned leatherette seats inside and red ambient lighting. I mean, it was awesome. It was just such a cool car. And back then, I was so infatuated with the idea of having a cool car and being the cool car guy. And I had it for 4 years. And I had one person ask me or say something to me about my car. Like one stranger. I was at a gas station, I remember, and somebody said, what brand of car is that? And I said, oh, it's a Volkswagen. I said, that's really cool. I've never seen that before. And 4 years, and that was the only stranger that ever said anything to me about my car. So all that posturing and all that fantasizing of me thinking I was Mr. Cool and wanting to be Mr. Cool and wanting people to notice me when I pulled up somewhere because I had a cool car, all of that. It was one guy with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth telling me that he thought my car was cool. So my advice is to think about what you actually place value on. And if ultimately, and this is a funny way to put it, but if your goal is to be admired and if your goal is to be impressing strangers, if you stop trying to do that and you focus on being a better person and doing all the things that will actually make you and your life better, then you will by default be that person that does impress strangers and does have people say, wow, look at that person. They've got their stuff together. Look at that person. Look at. So it's kind of a funny thing. But if you focus on trying to impress, if you focus on all the outward, all you're going to end up doing is wasting time that you can't get back when you should be focusing on your inward and allowing yourself to grow from the inside and project out in a good way. And now it's time for this week's Whisper In. And this week's Whisper In is a chef that I've been following for a while on Instagram. And his name is Dennis Prescott. And his Instagram handle is @DennisThePrescott on Instagram. He is a chef, and he is host of Netflix's Restaurants on the Edge. He has a new cookbook that is available now, and he has tons of awesome chefed out food recipes, but they are still approachable and doable by the average person. But if you think about like fun, sexy, date night, cool recipes and food, this is what you want to look at. His cookbook, Cook with Confidence, is out now. He seems like a super cool dude. He has tons of great recipes basically every day, and his Instagram account is awesome. Once again, his name is Dennis Prescott, and his Instagram account is @DennisThePrescott on Instagram. That is this week's Whisper In. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening to this. This podcast, Story Lesson Advice, comes out 2 times a month. I have another podcast that is on audio, but it is also video, where it's really designed to be, which is called I Hate Reading, which is a book review podcast that also comes out twice a month. It has its own audio feed, and it is on my YouTube channel @SaturdayIsDatterday Media. I also have another YouTube series called Unbox and Review, where I unbox and review products that I actually own. And I also provide the links to those products available if you'd like to purchase them. And then I have another YouTube video series called Bricks and Mortar, which is a culinary cooking series where I just cook a whole bunch of fun recipes. And I post that on YouTube about once every other week. I'll have a video for that. And also I'll have those condensed versions on Instagram. So to wrap up this episode, the story, the guy walking around with $5,000 in his pocket, it brought me back to me trying to impress strangers by buying cars that I couldn't afford and clothes that I couldn't afford. The lesson, stop trying to impress strangers. Why are we doing this? I don't understand this infatuation and this love affair that we have of wanting complete strangers to think that we're cool and that we've got everything together. And the advice that I would give myself, if I could go back and anybody else, is where do you place value? And at the end of the day, what things do you actually place value on? What do you truly think is important? And if everything was stripped away from you, what are you going to focus on and what would you classify as actually important? And if you're willing to focus on those things which are actually important, you will by default become more impressive to strangers. So there's a hack for you. The sponsor I wish I had is Bentgo. They are lunch boxes and meal preps and accessories for adults and for kids. I have them. They work really well in the freezer. They work really well going through the dishwasher, and they can absolutely take a beating. They've got a whole bunch of different things that I would highly recommend checking out. They are elevated beyond just your normal Tupperware that you buy at the grocery store. So throw out all that microplastic nonsense and go grab yourself something good. Bentgo lunch boxes and meal accessory prep for this week's sponsor, I wish I had. The Just the Tip segment goes in line with that. It is an obvious one. Get yourself a garbage can in the car if you don't have one. Most of us that have kids, you probably have one by now. But if you don't have a garbage can in the car, get one. It will absolutely make your life way, way better. And the Whisper In for this week is Dennis Prescott. He is a chef and a host of a Netflix series and a cookbook author. He has an Instagram account I've been following for quite a while. He's got just awesome recipes, really cool looking visual videos on Instagram and photos and everything. So his Instagram handle is @DennisThePrescott. I highly recommend checking him out. This week's Whisper In. So thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Story Lesson Advice Podcast, part of Saturday is Datterday Media. SIDmedia.net is where you can find the website, and @Saturday is Datterday Media is the YouTube and Instagram handle. If you are enjoying these podcasts, thank you very much for listening. Please consider sharing them with your friends and family. Please consider leaving a review. Please consider following the podcast if you are not already. So thank you so much, and we will see you next time on the Story Lesson Advice Podcast.